My name is Ethan Miller, and I'm 25 years old. I was born and raised in Elkhorn, a small, forgotten town in the heart of Nebraska, a place where life revolves around Sunday church, rodeos in August, and gossip at the corner diner. I grew up in a wooden house with peeling paint and a white fence, surrounded by cornfields as far as the eye could see. My father, Dennis, was a truck driver. One of those tough guys, with a worn-out cap and leather boots that he never took off, even at Christmas dinner. My mother, Linda, worked at the town's convenience store and spent more time complaining about life than actually living it. I was the oldest of 3 kids, but the most useless in their eyes. I was always more into technology than tractors. While my dad called me to help in the yard, I was taking apart an old computer I found in the trash, trying to figure out how it worked. In Elkhorn, that was seen as a character flaw. If you didn't have calluses on your hands, you weren't a real man. I graduated in business administration from the University of Nebraska at Kearney, thinking that would open doors. But I came back home during the pandemic, and the job market was more locked down than the town's bank vault. I bombarded HR departments everywhere, sent my resume to a pizzeria, and the response was always the same. You seem great, but we're not hiring right now. I spent 3 months without a job. I started to notice my mom's glances changing. The dinner plates weren't as full anymore. My dad's comments were getting harsher. You're a grown man, Ethan, and a grown man who eats at my table has to pay something. Otherwise, get out. The words were said on a random Tuesday, with the TV on in the background and my younger brother laughing at a TikTok. They thought I wouldn't leave, but I did. I grabbed my backpack, an old laptop, and $112 I had in a digital account. I slept in my car for 2 nights until I was able to rent a room in a shared house in Omaha. It was tiny, moldy, but it had an outlet and Wi-Fi, everything I needed. I started watching videos on digital marketing, drop shipping, copywriting, programming, video editing. I'd stay up all night studying. I became a freelancer on Fiverr. At first I earned pennies. I wrote product descriptions and captions for sales videos. But I got better. Really good. In 6 months, I had saved enough to start my own online store. I sold kitchen gadgets on TikTok. I created a character, Uncle Chuck, a funny farmer who used the products and gave ridiculous reviews. The videos went viral. I sold thousands. I bought paid traffic. I learned about sales funnels. I reinvested everything. I switched niches. I entered the anxiety supplements market. Then, I moved to courses for freelancers. Each success paid for 10 failures. 2 years later, my store was making $500,000 a month. I built a remote team. I hired other young people like me, rejected, underestimated, hungry. I created an online course, The Lone Wolf Method, teaching how to start from scratch. It exploded. The local press started calling me the Miracle of Elkhorn. I laughed. A miracle would be if my dad ever said he was proud of me. The strangest part? My parents started talking to me again. First, a message from my mom. Hey son, I saw you're doing well. That's great. Your dad had a problem with the truck. Do you think you could help? I helped. I paid for the repair. Then came the electricity bill. Then my brother's college tuition. Then a problem with the roof of the house. I never said no. Even after everything. Even after the cruel words. Even after being thrown out like a sick dog. A lot of people call me a fool for that. Maybe I am, but there's something inside me that's still that quiet kid who wanted to be seen, who wanted to hear, "We're proud of you." I never heard it. Even today, when I send money, my dad barely thanks me. My mom sends heart emojis. My siblings pretend they never laughed at my useless nerd phase. But that's okay. I bought a house in Austin, Texas. Modern, full of glass, with a basement studio and a fireplace I never use. My car is electric. My dog's name is Pixel. My day starts at 5 a.m. and ends at 10 p.m. I work more than ever, and I love it. Sometimes I get messages from people back in town. You're an inspiration. You've shown it's possible. And I reply with a rocket emoji. Elkhorn is still the same, my parents are still there, and I still help. I've thought about cutting ties. I've thought about saying, now deal with the consequences. But I can't, because deep down, I'm still that kid with hopeful eyes, holding an old laptop and believing the world out there had room for me, and it did. But it wasn't easy to figure that out. The hard part wasn't getting rich. It was looking my parents in the eye again after they kicked me out. Success brings noise. In the beginning, it's just a distant buzz. Some likes here, an email there, a local site asking for an interview. Then, it becomes a constant roar. People who never saw you as anything start calling you a genius, and those who know you pretend they always believed in you. After my store hit its first million in revenue, articles started coming out. Local NBC called me a self-made entrepreneur. A columnist wrote an article called "The Rejected Kid Who Became King of E-Commerce." And that's when my mom called me, her voice trembling. "Ethan, you're on TV." The pastor saw it and mentioned it at church. He said, "You're an example." I laughed, softly. I had to bite my lip to avoid saying, "An example of what, Mom? Of someone you kicked out of the house?" But I just said, "That's great, Mom. I'm happy." She cried, and I hung up without knowing why. It was as if every drop of their pride hurt more than the criticisms from the past. The requests for help started to increase. Small at first, an expensive medicine, a loan not approved, a new refrigerator. Then, the more audacious ones came. My dad wanted to open a car wash. He said it was his dream since he was young. I knew he barely knew how to use a banking app. But I sent the money. They set up the car wash. And within 6 months, he was drowning in debt and had to shut it down. They blamed the economy. They never thanked me. In the meantime, my business grew. I created a holding company. I diversified. I launched a productivity app for freelancers that hit 200,000 users. I gave a talk at SXSW in Austin and was featured on the cover of Wired. People from all over the world started following me, but none of it fulfilled me the way I thought it would. It was as if, deep down, every click, every sale, every dollar was a way to scream at my dad, "Look, I'm useful. I'm worth something." And he didn't hear. He never heard. That Christmas, after 5 Christmases spent away, I decided to go back to Elkhorn. I arrived in a rented car, a black, discreet SUV. It was snowing. My parents' house looked more worn than ever. The roof I paid for was still crooked. The gate I paid for with a Zelle deposit was still rusted. My mom hugged me like I was a prodigal son returning from war. She showered me with kisses on my face, just like when I was 10. She offered me apple pie and talked nonstop about my sister's new boyfriend, the pastor's fall from grace, and the neighbor's dog that had died. But she never asked how I was. My dad was in the garage, cleaning a wrench that had never been used. He looked at me as if I were a tax auditor. Finally decided, "To visit?" "Merry Christmas, Dad," I said. He nodded. He didn't hug me. He just gave me a dry pat on the shoulder. Christmas dinner was awkward. My siblings avoided talking about work. One of them was on his 3rd job of the year. The other still lived with my parents. None of them asked anything about my life in Austin. It was like my success was a contagious disease they were trying to avoid. At the end of the night, my dad called me out onto the porch. It was cold. I was shaking, not just from the wind. "You're rich now," he said. "But money comes and goes. You should invest in land. Land doesn't disappear." It was his way of saying congratulations. I knew that, but it still hurt. Because even now, after everything, he couldn't just look me in the eyes and say, "You did the impossible." I was wrong. I went back to Austin with a lump in my throat and a lingering anger. I locked myself in the studio for days. I created 3 new products in 1 week, recorded 40 videos, did live streams until my voice gave out. Then one night, I sat alone on my leather couch, a glass of expensive wine in hand, and realized I had everything and felt nothing. That's when I started therapy. My therapist, Dr. Monroe, was a woman in her 60s with white hair and round glasses. She didn't flatter me. She told me my biggest enemy was the child inside me still craving, Approval. Ethan, you're a success. But you still live as if you need to prove that to a man who never knew how to love a sensitive son. She was right. In June, my dad had a heart attack. It wasn't serious. But it was enough for my mom to call me, crying, saying he had asked for me at the hospital. I took the first flight to Nebraska. I stayed at the hospital for 3 days, sitting in a plastic chair by the bedside, listening to the beeps of the machines. On the second day, he looked at me and said, "You've become someone important, huh?" I tried. "You didn't have to. We just wanted you to work." Anything. I stayed silent. He continued, "I didn't know how to handle you. You were different. And I didn't understand that. I always thought a man had to do, not think. You did too much, thought too much. It made me nervous." I took a deep breath. That was the closest thing to an apology I would get. "I just wanted you to see me," I said. He looked away. I did. I just didn't know what I was seeing. He was discharged. He went home, and for the first time he asked me to stay a few more days. I stayed. I spent the week helping to remodel the garage. We didn't talk much. But one evening, sitting in 2 lawn chairs, he turned to me and said, "When you were little, you used to say you'd change the world." And I'd laugh. I thought it was just childish talk. And now? He looked out at the horizon. "I think you did change something, but not the world. You changed us. And maybe that's even bigger." I returned to Austin with a lighter heart. The request for help kept coming. My parents were still living in financial chaos, but now each transfer came with a conversation, a small exchange, a tentative attempt at connection. I kept helping, kept giving. But now, with boundaries, I created a family fund, monthly, organized, with rules, with a spreadsheet, and most importantly, with communication. Today, at 25, I own 4 companies. I employ 87 people. I offer scholarships to young people from rural areas who want to study technology. I create opportunities for those rejected by the system, like I was. And I continue being a son. Not the perfect son, but the son who learned that love doesn't have to come as validation. That sometimes strength isn't about revenge, but about forgiving without forgetting. Because in the end, building an empire was the easy part. The hard part was relearning how to love those who threw me away. And even harder, not letting the rejected boy inside me drive the car of my life. Today, I drive, and I do it with my eyes open and my heart at peace. In April of last year, I got a call from my mom with a trembling voice. She always had a melodramatic tone, which made it hard sometimes to gauge the seriousness of things. "Ethan, this time it's serious. We're going to lose the house." My head spun. I was on a call with my team from Australia, finalizing a multi-million-dollar licensing deal for our educational app in public schools. I asked for a moment, muted my microphone, and focused only on her. "What do you mean, lose the house?" I asked. "The mortgage is overdue. Your dad took out another loan, and I don't even know what he did with the money. I think he has credit card debt, debt with the shop, and oh, Ethan, I don't even know anymore." I closed my eyes, sighed. Inside, I already knew this was going to happen. For the last 2 years, I paid for repairs, gave allowances, invested in failed ideas, and funded my brother's attempt to start a clothing brand called Corn Country Swag. I gave without questioning. I gave out of need. I gave out of guilt. But now it was a house. It was the home of my childhood. And at the same time, the place that had kicked me out. The birthplace of my scars. Saving their house was like saving the very story that had hurt me. I asked for the documents, the bills, the statements. When everything arrived in my email, I realized the hole was deeper than I imagined. $128,000 in debt. This, considering overdue payments, accumulated interest, and 2 personal loans under my mother's name, both with suspended payments for months. If I wanted to, I could pay it all off with one click. But, and then, would it just be another rescue, another crutch? And I knew deep down that I was feeding a pattern. I talked to my therapist, talked to my lawyer, talked to my mentor, a Canadian investor who became a friend. They all said the same thing, with variations. Helping is not saving, it's teaching. But how do you teach responsibility to your own parents? I went to Elkhorn in person. I needed to see it in their eyes. Understand how far they were willing to go. I arrived on a cloudy morning. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Like everything in life, it had shrunk. My mom greeted me with a forced smile. My dad wasn't home. When I asked about him, she stalled. She finally confessed that he had gone to try and sell some tools at the flea market. Tools? I asked. To pay the mortgage? No. Just to see if some money comes in. The bank already called 3 times today. We sat at the kitchen table. I pulled out the papers, pointed at the numbers. Do you realize how you got here? She didn't answer. She just shrugged. You've always helped, Ethan. I thought you'd just keep doing it. I always helped because you never learned how not to need. The silence cut through the air like a knife. She cried. Called me ungrateful, arrogant, cold-hearted. You don't know what it's like to be poor, Ethan. You've forgotten. Now you're all fancy, living in a big city, thinking you're better than us. That one hurt. Mom, I slept in my car. For 3 nights when you kicked me out. I ate expired crackers and washed up in gas station bathrooms. Do you realize that? She opened her mouth to speak. Nothing came out. I haven't forgotten where I came from, but I learned not to live, stuck in that. At night, my dad came home. He looked defeated. When I entered the living room, he looked at me with the same hardness as always, but his voice was quiet. The house is in your mom's name. I tried to fix it, but I couldn't. Why did you take the loan, Dad? Because I didn't want to depend on you again. I thought it would work, but silence. But what? He stared at me. For the first time in a long time, he seemed smaller, human. But maybe we just don't know how to live outside of crisis. We got used to it. And you were our invisible safety net. Anytime you'd show up and save everything. I closed my eyes. That was recognition, a rare moment of clarity. So, maybe it's time for you to learn how to live without insurance. The next day, I called them both for a serious conversation. I brought documents, spreadsheets, options. I have 3 alternatives to offer, I began. Pay everything off. I'd pay the $128,000 and they'd keep the house, but with a signed legal contract. The house would be transferred to my name. They would live there, but I'd control the finances. Refinance, with the help of a lawyer. I'd step in as the guarantor, as long as they agreed to live on a fixed budget. Managed by a financial consultant I'd pay for a year. Sell the house, pay the debt, and help them move to a smaller home, one they could afford with their retirement, and side jobs. I'd assist with the move and initial costs, but no more allowances. They looked at each other as if they were standing before a judge. My mother wanted option 1. Of course, it was the easiest. To my surprise, my father chose option 3. That's enough, Linda. We've been living beyond our means for too long. He's right. We need to start over. She cried, made a scene. But for the first time, my father insisted. No more living, like beggars with credit cards. I'd rather have a smaller house than continue like this. Ethan has already done more than he should. And so, 2 months later, we sold the house. They moved into a modest but comfortable little house in a more distant neighborhood. I painted their new house for them, installed good internet, bought a new TV, and I said goodbye with a hug that carried the weight of 1,000 goodbyes. Today, 1 year later, things have changed. My mother started sewing again. She opened a shop on Etsy. She sells pillows with Christian phrases. She's happy. My father teaches automotive mechanics to teenagers at a community workshop. He discovered he likes teaching. They're not perfect yet. They still slip up sometimes. But now, they ask for less. They share more. There's dialogue. There's respect. And me? I keep growing. But more than that, I keep healing. I learned that helping isn't about putting out fires. It's teaching how not to start them. And that loving isn't about saving the other person from themselves. It's about letting them face their consequences, being there, but not in their place. The last time I spoke with my father, he said, "I kicked you out thinking it would make you ashamed, but I think it was me who needed to get my act together." I smiled. For the first time in many years, we smiled together, and for the first time in my entire life, I left Elkhorn with a light heart. No guilt, no resentment, and with the certainty that the empire I built wasn't just one of money, it was one of choices. And the most powerful of them was saying, "No, because I love you too much to keep making you weak."